What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, good, Joe. Long time listener, second time caller. So looking forward to another chat.
Yeah, should be fun, man. Yeah, I'm caught up with you for a bit. What's new?
Uh, Obviously, published the book in May, trying to write the second one now. When they say writing your first book's a nightmare, second one's even worse. I now, yet again, understand and should have listened. Apart from that, yeah, just getting ready for a big move from New Zealand to the UK. So,
Dang,
kind of a bit of a chaos year of change. But hey, change is good.
I guess. I mean, you just published your first book. I think you got the cover right behind you. The Information Product Canvas. Was that it?
Yep, that's the one. Yep, done the old stick the book on the, well, not on the bookshelf, but on the Mac. Yeah.
Cool. Congrats, man. That's awesome. What was that like?
In terms of what, the writing process?
Everything, yeah. Coming up with the idea.
Yeah,
So now we talked about it. Like you said, you wanted to write a book because you wanted to write a book. I think I was like, okay, well, have fun.
Yeah. So everybody says it's a horrible process, and they're right. It's just awful. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is such a horrible. Well, it was for me, right? It was not enjoyable. I write a lot, but I'm not a natural writer, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the problem. I mean, what about you? When you wrote your first one and now you're writing your second one, do you actually enjoy the process of writing?
I do a lot. But why would I enjoy it? I think that's an interesting question. I think it's a way of helping you think more clearly about a topic, or in a book, I think presents the opportunity to delve into a topic in ways that are just really difficult to do otherwise, right? Because you have to cover everything like laterally and longitudinally, so it's very. I think it's hard in that respect, but you do it because I don't know. You have to have your own reasons. Obviously, some people like I bet there's some people that don't like to write that do books. Maybe you're one of them. I don't know, but it's. But I think at some point you do end up I think you end up enjoying the writing process, whether you think you do or not. I mean, why else would you do it? So it's like enjoying shoving bamboo shoots up your fingernails. There could be other things you could do with your time. So.
Yeah, I suppose the way I look at it is when I naturally enjoy something, I'll just do it. I don't have to force myself, right? It was just like, yep, I'm going to go do that. What I found with the writing process was I had to force myself to spend time doing the writing process. And, there was that buzz when I finished a page and I go back and read the page and go, hey, I don't hate that page. It's distilled a whole lot of complex ideas into a bunch of words that in my head makes those complex ideas simple, right? And that's the buzz for me is saying, yeah, how do you take those things I could talk about for ages and just waffle on and get them into 1,000 words that make sense to somebody else?
Yeah.
And as I said to you when I first started, why am I doing it? Because I've always wanted to do it, right? I've always wanted to write a book, and that was the itch that I wanted to scratch. After I've published it, I've been kind of really happy that a bunch of people I've never known have picked up the book and actually used the pattern without me. They've read it, they've used it, they said it just worked. It solved a small problem in their data work. So for me, that was probably a secondary benefit of it. But it was definitely a vanity project. It was like, I just want to write a freaking book, and I've tried a few times and I've failed, and I'm not going to fail this time.
Right.
But then I got hyper focused on making it a book that I was happy with. Which was the second challenge, right? Not just writing a book and saying I've done it. Then it had to be a book that actually I didn't hate. And that was the probably hardest part of the process for me.
Oh, for sure. Because I think, especially now, I mean, you could theoretically crank out a book and in an hour, a book, right? Just, I don't know, use a large language model for it, and then away you go. I think a lot of people do this. And if that's your motivation, is to only just publish a book on, Kindle Direct Publishing, I mean, go for it. I think Amazon stops you now at 3 books per day, which is kind of funny. So
and I mean the whole process of using Amazon Kindle Direct, right? That whole process of actually publishing your book's a bloody nightmare. So I suppose once you know how to do it, you might as well just pump them out.
That's just it. Yeah, so you got the muscle memory now, so that's cool. What is your book about?
So the problem is that I've seen for decades is data teams talk to stakeholders, ask them what they want, stakeholders tell them. The data team think they understand, they go away and build something. They give it back to the stakeholder, and the stakeholder says, that's not what I wanted. And I have seriously heard data teams say, but that's what you asked for. And, when I looked at it, there's lots of things that we can do to fix that. We can deliver back quicker, we can iterate, we can get feedback. But the core problem was a lack of a shared language. Stakeholders have been trained by us as data people to talk in terms of reports and lists and data requests, right? I want a dashboard and I want to have this table and I want these 3 fields on it, or I want this Excel file. So we've taught them to talk that way. So that's the requirements they give us. Data teams then talk in source systems, right? We start talking about where's the data come from, what format it is, do we have to conform the dimension, a whole lot of things we care about. And there was no shared language in the middle. And so I've been working on that for over a decade. And then in one of the projects I did with an organization, we kind of lucked across this idea of the business model canvas. And we used that as a template to actually capture requirements. And something changed. We found that when we had this A3 piece of paper that had 12 boxes in it that were constrained in time and what we could put in there, and we had a specific language of how we filled it out, stakeholders gave us what we needed, and we ended up focusing more on what's the action and the outcome that they're trying to achieve, not what's the data they wanted. And that was the other switch. So that was the problem, right? Data requirements gathering in a way that stakeholders, I talk about loving it, but at least don't hate it. They turn up, they walk away going, yeah, that was right, and that data teams can potentially build from.
Man, it's interesting. So you mentioned the business model canvas, and I think there's a cousin, the lean canvas, and so forth. Maybe can you walk listeners through what those are?
Yeah, so the business model canvas came out. Two gentlemen who wrote a great book in the canvas, and I'll butcher their names, so I won't try. And basically, it was a way of doing your business strategy on a page with a small number of boxes. So you go in and say, what's your business about? What's your strengths? What's your weaknesses? Where's your revenue coming from? Where's your expenses? Who's your target customers? Those kind of things. And it was this combination of a template that was easy to understand and a process to fill it out. And that combination just had massive value, and it kind of went viral. It's a bit like team topologies, right? It's one of those books that you read and Phoenix Project, you read it and you go, wow, that seems so simple. Why didn't I think of that? But you don't. And then we were really gifted in that they open sourced or Creative Commons the canvas. They said, hey, if you want to take this and iterate it, feel free. So that's why we saw the Lean Startup canvas. We've seen a whole lot of canvases, right? Because the pattern of using a canvas somehow fixes a whole lot of problems when we're trying to think and communicate.
Oh, yeah. And I think the canvas is, I use it in countless activities. I think it's a really clarifying exercise, right? So if I'm looking at a lean canvas here, there's a problem, your cost structure, solution key metrics, your unique value proposition, your unfair advantage channels and customer segments. And I think it really forces you to think it through all the different aspects of a business. Whereas if you were to write a business plan, for example, that was one of the I think the impetus is for the business model canvas was just the business plan was very cumbersome, and by the time you're done writing it, you haven't had a chance to test anything in the real world. You just have a business plan, and that's not reality. So that's but you'd see a lot of people write these elaborate business plans, and I think it's a clarifying exercise, but the best thing to do is go test things out in reality and keep adjusting your model, and the canvas lets you do that. So what is there in the information product canvas? Is there also the notion of being able to iterate as facts on the ground change?
Yeah, so I talk about the idea of an information value stream, right? So if we look at the way data teams work, we're seeing a lot more product behavior coming in. So if we think of it as a continuum, and we start off with there is a business problem, an organizational problem needs to be solved, and then we can bring from product thinking this idea of ideation and discovery. Okay, we have a problem. Potentially, we can solve that problem with data. What are our ideas, right? What's the 3-5 different ways that we could use data to solve our churn problem? To increase our ability to forecast what our customers want to buy. to optimize our supply chain, to reduce our churn of headcount. Yeah, all these business problems that we know exist, and we can use data to potentially solve them. So what are the ideas? Okay, we come up with 3 to 5 potential ways we could use data to solve that. How do we then discover which one is the most valuable to build right now? And then if we're in a large organization, once we have that discovery, we're going to discover 20 things we could do, and we have a constraints-based model of one or many data teams. So how do we prioritize which is the next most valuable product to build? And so that's the left-hand side of the value stream for me. It's a continuum. And that's bringing all that product thinking that we've talked about for the last couple of years into the way we work. On the right-hand side, we then talk about the data factory or the information factory. We go into a design phase, ideally. That's where we might do things like, model some data lightly. And then we go into effectively a build phase, and then a deploy phase, and then a maintain and enhance, right? And at the end of that deploy phase, or making it available, we've effectively got value, right? We've added value by trying to solve that problem. If we can increase the speed we get through that loop, if we can increase the speed between the statement of the problem and the delivery of that potentially valuable product, then we get a whole lot of benefits. We get feedback. Yeah, it's like, actually, that's what we all thought it was going to solve that problem, but it didn't. Okay, what's the next thing we can do? We can deliver more valuable products for more problems, right? We can chunk it down to smaller things. We don't spend 6 months building a big, massive lifetime value model. We may spend a week building the revenue part of it, because that has value anyway. It solves a business problem. So that's the goal, right? It's just let's go through there. And then if you look at the canvas, we can use it primarily. I use it in the discovery phase, that ideation and discovery phase, but I can use it from a design point of view to start conceptually modeling. Yeah, if you give me a canvas well filled out, I can give you back a concept model for that organization, because the hints are there. It's telling me that these customers, suppliers, and employees. It's telling me these orders and payments and returns. It's giving me, as a data modeler, the hints I need to understand the language of the business. So yeah, it has value all over the time if you want to use it there. But you don't have to. You can just use it in discovery only, and it's got value just at that stage.
Is it more? Help me clarify this. So is it used mostly for kind of new greenfield projects, or could you use it also on established kind of brownfield endeavors as well?
Yeah, both. The greenfield one's an interesting problem. So the problem with greenfields is, and even if it's a legacy rebuild, right? Let's treat that as a greenfield. Got a legacy platform, got 1,000, business objects reports, need to rebuild it in the modern data stack or my AI chatbot. What we can do is we can use it to lightly discover all the things we could potentially rebuild. Yeah. And then ideally we're discovering those in 10 minutes or less. And then we get this big list of things, 150 potential products we could build to replace the legacy platform we have. What's the first thing we want to build? So, one team I worked with, they did that. They came up with about 280 information products. They only filled out part of the canvas for that because the rest of the canvas was waste at that stage. They then grouped them by domain, they grouped them by business unit, they grouped them by some form of where the data lives. And then they said, right, if I put a circle around that, if I create a boundary, these 3 products seem like the most valuable ones to build first. Yeah. And then they'd pick it up and fill out the rest of the canvas and get more detail because they're moving into the design phase. For brownfields, if you want to change the way you work, if your problem is you don't understand the requirements, they take too long to gather, they're waste, stakeholders never turn up to your 4-hour workshop, or if they do, they're on their phones ignoring you. If you're building something and you give it back to the stakeholder and it's not what they wanted, then change the way you work and experiment with the canvas and see if it fixes that one problem, because that's what it's designed to do.
Yeah, you mentioned the workshop thing. I think that's interesting because I read some other data modeling books, and when it gets to the workshop part, these workshops can be exhausting from a time perspective, and I think the intent is good, but just realistically getting people in a room for consecutive workshops, each of which are an hour to several hours, I just don't know that's realistic. So,
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we used to do multi-day ones, right? You know, we used to do the large data modeling workshops where, you know, we would use a bunch of techniques. You know, we've done ones where, you know, I was using Beam from Lawrence Core to catch the data requirements in the front of the room, and we'd have two data modelers that were data vault modeling in the back of the room, right, to try and optimize the process. That was a fun experiment. But it was multiple days. If you think about it, we were trying to map the entire organization. And in hindsight, it was waste. Yes, it was interesting. Yes, it was valuable for us as data people. I'm not so sure it was for the stakeholders that had to sit through that for 3 days.
Yeah.
But how much of that did we actually use in the first 12 months?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. So, you know, how do we not steal those 3 days of time from those stakeholders? How do we chunk it down into small bits that are valuable, get exactly what we need for the step we're in? That's an interesting problem to solve. I think the other thing is, we have a habit of, data modeling heroes. You know, people who have done data modeling for 30 years can listen to a business, you know, a stakeholder talk about their organization, and they can actually model a really good data model. But they do that in isolation. There's no feedback loop. They go away into a cupboard for a while and come back with a, you know, enterprise data model that is really, really useful. But there's no buy-in. Right, there's no feedback loop. There's no sales job as you're doing it. It's just an isolated practice, and I think we need to change that. We need to become more interactive with our stakeholders. Otherwise, we become that data team that just goes away and builds something and comes back, and it was probably what they asked for. Yeah, actually, it was. It's always what they asked for, right? But it's not what they wanted. Yeah.
There's I think, a very important but subtle distinction there, and But I like this approach of product thinking because it makes things a lot more incremental and iterative versus big design up front, which is traditionally what data modeling has been. Come up with the enterprise data model or whatever. I just think the willpower for that kind of stuff, especially nowadays, is it's lacking. There's just constraints on time, constraints on budgets. I would say that the noble purposes of the data model has also perhaps not done it many favors in the sense where it's perceived as being slow and cumbersome. And that's, for better or for worse, kind of is what it is. So, yeah. And so kind of taking a step back, you have this term information product. How do you reconcile that against these other terms out there, like data product? Now AI product is another one. And I guess people are calling it knowledge products as well. I don't know what the hell is going on here, but information product, what is it?
So it's me being grumpy, right? And I wrote in the book, I wrote a page on what's the difference between an information product and a data product. There's no difference. I can differentiate it in my language, right? I say they are different. I talk about data assets and information products. But why information product? Because about 10 years ago, I was working with a company here in New Zealand called Tertiary Education Commission. We were iterating their way of working. Funny enough, we weren't allowed to call it agile because they had an agile failure. So when I got brought in, key stakeholder I worked for said, we're going to call this iterative ways of working because we can't use the agile word. And so we were experimenting with, back then, this idea of a requirements brief. It was a Word document. It had effectively the same sections as the Canvas, but it was just a Word document that we filled out. And I was working with a gentleman called Gerhard de Beer, and we said, well, we have to give this thing a name, right? And so he basically said, well, let's call it an information product. The boundary of the data, the delivery mechanism, the stakeholder, what they're going to use it for, where the data comes from, the core business events that it relates to, that boundary we'll call an information product. Funny enough, when I finished the book, I went back to him and said, can you remember where that came from? Like, did you make that up? Did you read it? And he was like, dude, it's 10 years ago. I've got no idea. But I know it pretty much came from him or one of the other team members. So apologies to anybody from TEC on that piece of work if it was you, not Gerhard. And so for me, then it's just the term I've used, right? I've used information product. Then the market kind of picked up data product. And I had to make a call, right? It was like, well, am I going to go and change the term I've always used to be what the new buzzword is? No. Everybody now understands what a data product is to a degree. Should I change it so that it's a shared language? Nah, can't be asked. And so, yeah, it's just vanity, right? But I do differentiate between a data asset, and an information product. So to go back to your question, for me, an information product can have multiple delivery types. Yeah, it can be a dashboard, a report, a data service, an AI chatbot, an MCP service, right? The delivery type is only one part of that product. It should contain the data that is needed to power that product. And then we can talk later about, well, okay, well, if I've got data that's reusable, how do I deal with that? It should be focused on a specific set of personas. You know, the product for a senior manager may be different for the product from a frontline staff member. And so for me, that's what an information product is, right? It's basically the data, the logic, the delivery mechanism, and gives us a boundary that I can say, you know, there's a box of Honey Puffs, cereal here in New Zealand. There's a box of Cocoa Puffs, another cereal in New Zealand. They're different products, right? They're both for breakfast. They're both targeted with high sugar value. They're both targeted at kids. One's chocolate flavored, one's honey flavored. They kind of look the same, but they're different products, right? If I pull them off the shelf, I kind of know who they're for. And so for me, that's how I think of a product in the data space.
And then I guess there's also this progression that you sometimes see of data, information, knowledge, and wisdom.
Yeah.
Have you got any questions about your choice of the word information with respect to that hierarchy?
No. It's like ontology, taxonomy, and semantic layers. I mean, I can see that hierarchy, right? I can see why we use that pattern to describe some things. And, you know, in the old days, we used to fall back to what's the story about a tomato, you know, it's, you know, data is it's red, and, you know, information is it's a fruit, and knowledge is you don't put it in a smoothie. I think that's an interesting framing. I'm not sure where we use it.
As I've been writing my own book, I do mention this hierarchy somewhere, and I think it's a convenient abstraction. But I think it's a wrong abstraction, because it assumes that knowledge and wisdom and information are sort of a linear progression from data. But that also presupposes data just magically forms, like it wasn't informed by any other process, like wisdom, knowledge, or information going the other direction. So So I felt like this is it's convenient for some people. The more I thought about it, the more I think it's actually pretty silly in a lot of other ways. So,
I suppose I liken it back to documentation, right? So if I'm working with a data and analytics team and we're doing documentation, my question is, what's it driving? What's its purpose? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, why are we doing that effort, or is it waste? Yeah, some documentation is useful, some documentation is waste. And then if we get back to semantics, if I use two terms, how do I know they're different? Like black and white, you tell me. I mean, if I told you that a data asset is purely a table, and an information product is the data, the code, the delivery mechanism, and it's targeted at a specific subset of users, you can start to visually see what the difference is. Yeah, if I see a dashboard, it can't be a data asset because it's not a table. Yeah, if it's a dashboard with just a table in it, then maybe, right? And so where I struggle with data, information, knowledge, and wisdom is like, okay, I get it, but how do I use it?
Right.
Like, let's take products, right? If a AI agentic thing is giving me an answer to my natural language question, how do I say that's a knowledge product or a wisdom product, not a data product or not an information product? Like, how do I know? How do I know it's a box of chocolate sugar-flavored cereal versus honey sugar-flavored cereal? I can't tell the difference. And that's probably me, right? Because I haven't gone and done the work.
Yeah.
But you must find that with your book, right? When you're going through and saying data modeling for relational operational systems, data modeling for NoSQL, you know, that ability to say this thing is a thing because it's different from that thing, and here's how I can describe the two. That's obviously something that's a bit of a challenge in the data modeling space. Are you finding that with what you're writing?
Well, I think to take a step back, it's also bucketing in like what's appropriate to discuss from a data modeling perspective versus something that's not a quote data modeling problem or use. But I think increasingly these are becoming a bit more vague than they used to, right? With the rise of AI, for example, at least in its current form, you're starting to see words like knowledge being thrown in. Context engineering now is the other one, and so forth. And this is it wouldn't be so much of a problem if AI was just sort of off on its own over here, but it's increasingly integrated into pretty much every other use case, operational use cases, analytics, and so forth. So what are the boundary lines these days? This book would have been easier to write 5 years ago when you didn't have this problem. But now you have the library sciences that are now being integrated into the data world and vice versa. Historically, these have been, separate, gangs on the street, and now, the Crips and the Bloods are, forming a super gang, so to speak. And so it's interesting seeing this right now. So I don't know that my answer would be as clear cut as it would have been, right? But the examples that you gave operationally, right? NoSQL, versus kind of traditional relational. I mean, there are ways that you can actually apply relational concepts to, semi-structured data as well. I.e., do you have redundancy or don't you? How much are you repeating yourself within a nested structure? And so there's, I go through that in the book a bit, but so you can definitely borrow the concepts, but these aren't like directly a one-to-one mapping. I guess they are in a sense we're using set theory, but no, but it gets interesting because you start looking at the nuances and the contours of all these other fields and whatnot. I think it's almost more confusing because you realize how related everything is to some degree.
And also, I spent a lot of time kind of merging with teams agile ways of working. So patterns from agile with data teams.
Yeah.
And then, last couple of years I've been grabbing patterns from product, the way they work, and bring it into the data domain. And my next journey is probably going to be library sciences.
Yeah.
But it's hard because as soon as I get into that domain, I now have to understand a whole new language. I have to understand what's the difference between a taxonomy and an ontology. And I'm playing around with this idea of context right now. And I've kind of got to the stage where I'm going, actually, to do the next step, I need to actually learn from the library sciences what an ontology is. Because I have a bunch of objects, right? I have an object that is a business question. How many customers have we got and where do they live?
Yeah.
And then I have a concept of an action. Yeah, I want to know where our customers live so I can actually place a store close to where the majority of the customers are and those store exists. That's the action I want to take. I have an outcome. By placing that store in that area, we're going to increase our revenue, right? Number of products sold and our revenue. So each one of those things I can define really well because they're part of the canvas. But how they relate to each other, if I was going to put that into a context plane and let an AI machine agent thing use that context to do a task, actually now I probably need an ontology model for it. But I don't come from library sciences. I had one on my podcast to explain to me what a taxonomy was once, right? Because I was like, I need to know this. So we have all this new language, all this new set of patterns that are outside the domains I work in. They're really valuable. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it's the merging of those patterns that actually we're seeing the world change at the moment. At least I think so.
Oh, I think it's definitely happening, right? But it wouldn't have happened without large language models. And so, because for the longest times, these were two separate camps. And I still think that there's a bit of, it's being a data person or not a, quote, library or knowledge person, I do think that there's still a pretty big gap between these two worlds. The data people, I think we keep plowing ahead with the data stuff, so to speak, and the library sciences and the graph folks over here. Like it feels like they finally got their time in the sun, and they're like it's so it's interesting to watch. At the same time, I've said this to a few of my library sciences friends. I feel like the way that they go about explaining things needs to improve if they're going to bring the data people over to their world. Right now, it feels like it's very much almost condescending, and they're talking down to data people. At least a lot of the coverage I've seen, I don't, so it's, and I think it's not going to do those worlds any favors. Because at the end of the day, they do need the data people to rise themselves up as well, to raise themselves up. So,
Yeah, I think we've seen this before, right? I mean, I don't know. We could look back in history and go, oh, I know, expert data modelers that used to model by themselves, and people came into the market. I don't know, picked up a tool, became analytics engineers, maybe, right? We democratized the access to some of the work we used to do. And they struggled to find out what this data modeling thing was, right? It was hard, hidden, expensive to learn, a whole lot of language that never changed. And so they didn't do it consciously. Whose fault's that? It's not theirs. It's ours, right? So I think you're right. Same with library sciences. If I'm sitting here and saying, I think I'm quite a well-educated, smart person and I like to learn, and I'm still freaking struggling with our RDF, ontologies, taxonomies, and all these things, it kind of makes me feel like that information's not accessible in a way that I can distill.
I think so. I'm looking at the book, The Accidental Taxonomist, which Jessica Talisman recommended to me. Is sort of the book about taxonomy. I read it and I think the book sucks. It's unreadable. It's pedantic, and it doesn't really bring a beginner like myself into the fold, right? Like I tried to read it. I definitely tried. I'm not stupid either. But yeah, I just didn't feel like it was presented in an approachable way. So I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's just like what you're saying. Like analytics engineers come along, they don't learn data modeling. That's the fault of the data modeling community at the end of the day.
But it's hard, right? So if you think about the success of your book around data engineering, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, part of that success is a bunch of people came into our domain, they picked up your book, they read it, and they kind of understood what the steps in our domain were. Yeah, so but if you think about how much time it took you to write that book in a way that a person outside our domain could come in, read it, and understand the domain with nothing else but that book. The ability to take that complexity and make it simple is what takes all the time. So again, if I think about my book, the fact that somebody can pick it up, read it. I had somebody from the UK, never met the person, and she basically messaged me and said, I bought your book, I read it, I ran a workshop the next week, I got stuck on this one part, everything else worked.
Right.
I'm like, okay, actually that's success, but the amount of time it takes to distill that complexity down into simplicity. That's why you can't just write a book in 3 days and work it out there, in my view, right? Because you have to be able to teach something to somebody new. And you're not in the room. In one of the first drafts I did, I sent it off to an editor. And she came back and she gave me a brilliant piece of advice. She said, I need your voice.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen what you've written. I need your voice to talk me through it because I don't understand it. And I was like, okay, shit, that didn't work, right? But that was the feedback I needed. And I think, if you think about it, how much quicker could you have put that first book out if you just wanted to talk to people who already knew that subject, people who are already experts? It would have been quicker,
easier
right?
To do. Yeah, just like I think it's easier to make the technical code heavy books, right? Because your only competition at that point is the documentation. You have a rubric to follow, actually, which is the documentation of a tech product, or it's Python or whatever, right? Pick your poison, but like. Yeah, a book like yours would be hard to write. I would have a hard time writing it just because there's a lot to think about. Like, you have sort of a rubric to start with. You have the canvas, but then how do you translate that into something that's applicable to data people, right? It's hard. Hasn't been done before. But you have to make it easy to read. But I think the sign of success is exactly what you indicated, where if you're getting, out of the blue feedback from people around the world, like that, to me, that shows that you won. Could it be better? Yeah, your book can always be better, right? But you have to put a line in the sand at some point and get the damn thing out. But you should definitely consider that a big win, personally, and from an author standpoint, where I think you're ready for a next book if you can get that kind of feedback. If you got no feedback, for example, right, nobody cared. One, that means you probably suck at marketing. Two, it means your book hasn't reached the point where people will share it. either.
Yeah.
So marketing only lasts for about probably the first month of a book. Then it's word of mouth, right? But like, so congrats. I mean, because you got what most authors don't get, which is you got people that care.
Yeah. And it's a small number, right? And so, I think it was you that told me, you're not going to make money out of a book. You're not going to sell. You're not going to be the, fundamentals of data engineering. There's these outlier books that you look at. I mean, what is it? I saw Team Topologies coming out with second edition, and I think he said they've sold 250,000 books.
Which is incredible. It's awesome.
Which is, and what are they there? Something like 23,000 in the book listing on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
So if you think about the volume of the success of that book, but that's what intrigues me. So I go for if I think about the books I've read, Lawrence Kor's Bean book was one of the first ones I read, and I actioned straight away. I read a lot of Ralph Hughes books back in the really early days around agile and data and that, because that's where I was. Phoenix Project. I read it, I loved it. It kind of started me thinking about data ops as a form of DevOps, right? I got that out of the book. Team Topologies, the shape of teams, it really affected how I think and how I work with teams. And so these seminal books that I remember reading that I could action at least one thing from, and that's the magic, I think, is these people that can write something. You read it and you're like, oh, I think I can apply that tomorrow. Badly or well, I don't know, but I can try it. I understand it enough to give it a go, and I think that's the magic of good books.
Well, it is, and talking to Lawrence Korr last year, actually, he was at your booth, I believe, and yeah, I was surprised to learn that I didn't know that he actually self-published it, which was pretty cool, but I guess the publisher he was working with, something didn't work out, and so he took a gamble on himself, and I think that was a brilliant move. But it obviously worked out for him. He's able to leverage that into workshops, into courses, into a very good livelihood for himself, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I remember you told me once that, so he wrote the book for a publisher, finished it, and they said, no, we're not publishing it. Right. Which must be brutal, right? I mean, I suppose it was back in the... Yeah, it was back in the day, though, when publishing was expensive. It wasn't just uploading to Amazon. And then he said, cool, it's an itch I want to scratch. I want this book to get out in the world. So, if I remember it right, he actually went back and rewrote it. He wrote the book he wanted to write and then published that. And I think that's key. You got to write the book you want to write. If everybody turns around, I remember, again, when one of my early drafts, somebody says, this looks like a PowerPoint deck. And I'm like, thank you. And they're like, what do you mean? Yeah. I love the business model canvas book. It's a book that's stuck in my head for years. It's the format and design is a book that I aspire to. And so it's unashamedly an iteration of that. Interesting, I approached the authors and said, I want to write a book in data space, but it's going to kind of look and feel like your book. Is that okay? Is there a copyright? And that was, they're both academics. That was a really interesting conversation.
Oh, interesting. Around that. And this is the business model generation, I believe, is the book that you're talking about, right? Yeah, it's a great book.
This one here.
Yep.
Yeah, but what's interesting is I learned from it. I learned that there's lots of noise in it, and the text is too small. So I was like, okay, I need to make, less noise, bigger words, bigger letters, to help it be more readable.
Oh, yeah. But that book inspired a whole generation of founders, right? That and also Steve Blank's book, Startup Bible or whatever it is, and Eric Ries's Lean Startup. All those three are the sort of, the three of the four horsemen of the startup founders, library, at least, the last 15 plus years, something. So, yeah, great book.
And why was that? Because, you can read the Lean Startup, and then there's a whole lot of actionable things, right? You can go, there's one thing I can do, a pattern, right? I can try this thing. I think it is explained in a way I kind of understand it, and I can give it a go, right? It's kind of interesting, and I was just going to come back to data modeling. Because, a lot of people have always said, we don't data model. And I think I got it from you was the term, well, actually, you don't consciously data model, because as soon as you touch data and you change its structure, you're modeling, right? You're unconsciously modeling. And And then there was this interesting comment on the Discord the other day. And it kind of came back from this logic of, if I have a table of data and all I do is tag a row and an extra column, right? So I have a table of data, say maybe customer details, and I add one column and I put a tag in there that says customer. That's all I'm doing. I may not actually even touch the data itself. I may just touch the context, the metadata of it, to say that this is customer data. Is that modeling? Because I'm not. It breaks my definition, right? My definition is you've changed the structure of the data, therefore you are modeling. If I don't actually add another column and I'm just adding metadata, I'm adding context to it, am I modeling? And I thought about it, I was like, hell yeah, right. So now I'm like, damn, my very clear cultural term for when you're data modeling, damn, it's broken again. Yeah.
It's true. It is. But it's that simple too, and it kind of, I think, goes back to the type of book that you just wrote too, where an information product doesn't need to be this, grand product. It can be something that's quite microscopic, perhaps. It fulfills a purpose, right? And that's kind of all. Like I have a paperclip right here, right? That's a product. Is it as complicated as an iPhone? No. Does it need to be? No, because these are two different things. These do not you do the same thing. I think this is, but when we model data, for example, right? There's this notion that a model needs to conform to certain things, right? It needs to be a data vault model. It needs to be relational, and like these. No, these are two different things. They accomplish two different goals for two different use cases. These are not the same things. Do not mistake a paperclip for a phone, or do, and look like an idiot. I don't really care. But I think it's this notion in modeling, when you mention data modeling to analytics people, and the first thing it says, well, Kimball, almost like this reflexive, Pavlovian response.
But why is that, right? I mean, I just finished recording a podcast with Johnny Winter, and it's patterns of dimensional modeling. Because what I realized was, on my podcast, I've been going through a series of describing patterns. And so, of course, I had somebody describe data vault, and then I went off into the esoteric ones, right? Hook, activity schema, those kind of ones. And then I was sitting back the other day going, holy shit, you know what I haven't done? I haven't actually had somebody come on and explain the patterns of the world's most popular data modeling, analytical data modeling technique, right? So Johnny went through, because he's a much better expert on it, and explained, all the different parts of dimensional modeling and what they are and why you should care. But one of the questions I kind of made me think of is why? Like, why did dimensional modeling become the de facto standard for DBT? And it's because of access to the information and the patterns is readily available. Ralph Kimball and Margie Ross wrote a shit ton of books that are easy to read. There's a bunch of blog posts that have specific problems and how you solve them. The ability to get access to that information about that modeling technique in a way you can actually use it. Compared it to the books on Data Vault, you read a Data Vault book and God help me, it's like that book you mentioned.
I'm looking at Data Vault 2.0 right now, and that thing is a tome. And then, of course, you have all the, there's the Dan Lindstedt camp of 2.0. Then you got Hans Holmgren and the other, I think they mentioned they're 42 or something like that. So it's like these two different. And then, I talk to Hans, and he's very accepting of all the other variants off it, right? Focal, anchor, whatever. And it's kind of like now you have all these other kind of subsects of Data Vault. But the cool thing with them is they talk, they collaborate, they incorporate where it makes sense and so forth. At least that's what Hans said. But it's like, it's just, but when you kind of zoom out, finding literature on this stuff is still hard. It's not mainstream still. So
and there's a bunch of books. I mean, you Patrick Kuber's book is a great technical book on Data Vault, but if you're not a technologist, if you're not deep in the weeds, it's quite hard as a newbie to go in there and pull it out. And the interesting thing is, there's a concept of ensemble modeling, of which Data Vault is a variation, and anchor and focal. So there's a bunch of ensemble modeling, because ensemble modeling itself is a pattern, and there's a bunch of variations. And so, there's almost dimensional versus Data Vault wars. Well, there were. I remember I used to be.
There were.
And then there's Data Vault X versus another form of data vault war, and then ensemble variation wars. And I kind of go back to the, back in the days where we had Kimball versus Inmon, we used to get really heated in those conversations from memory. The internet wasn't really a thing back then, so it was more in-person ones. But I remember you saying, you talked to Bill about it, right? And it wasn't him and Ralph that were fanning the war, it was the rest of us.
No, I talked to Bill about this several times, and each time it's him and Ralph Kimball got along just fine. They were friends. There's a lot of non-public stuff which I probably can't talk about that also helped fuel the flames on this, according to Bill. But there's a lot of, I think, background drama that happened that sort of definitely fueled the flames of this. But it's in the past now, and even Margie Ross, I think that she had an article on the Kimball Group's site, just kind of like, who cares, let it go. I think it was in the early 2010s or whatever, but yeah, and I'm looking at Ralph's book right now, and it's the #1 bestseller in data warehousing books still, right, with an overall ranking of 39,548 in books right now. This is for paperback. So but that was 1996, I believe, that it came out. But it goes to show the longevity of it. There was a lot of resources. And it's one of these techniques that people grew up on. And so, if you hear about it, it's because it was probably passed from generation to generation, and there's a lot of materials you can learn about it. And I think that's a perfect example of like just effective marketing of an idea. Ralph, he managed to make a very good living off of, Kimball University and so forth, and just selling the idea, selling the practice, selling the consulting. But it's like, to be #1 about like 30 years later is pretty impressive.
And there's a couple of things about that. So he didn't paywall the idea.
Right.
You could pick up dimensional modeling and you could use it without him, and it was okay. He made his money out of being the expert. We used to talk about, oh my God, can we get God to come and present in New Zealand? Because I'd pay to do that, right? I'm on LinkedIn. Somebody the other day, mentioned on LinkedIn, I went to one of the original Kimball courses in New Zealand. That's still a badge of honor. But he didn't paywall the idea. What he did was he freely shared the idea, and then he provided content and things that you paid for to learn the idea in a better way. And I think now it's going to change though, right? I think with the AI world, we're going to start, paywalling the ideas more because people won't pay for the content. And the other thing that I learned in self-publishing, because when you learn this new skill, right? Like at the moment, I'm learning how the hell you do table of contents and indexes in Adobe InDesign, so you can reflow or whatever to do the ebook
same
version.
thing right now. Yeah.
Oh, mate, kill me now. But I just assumed that in Amazon, the volume of books you sold over the 30 years is what got you the ranking. But it's not true. It's actually, it resets where you live on that ranking every hour based on how many books have been bought. So let's think about that, right? Let's think about the fact that Kimball's books are still actually selling today at a volume that outsells a book like mine. To a magnitude of 10. Like that is just amazing about that book.
If I look at my book right now, it's #1 bestseller as well, right? It ranked 20,000, but it goes between like 10 and 20 every but it fluctuates throughout the day. But the thing is, like, that book's 3 years old now, which in data books that's dog years. Kimball's book, I think, that's been around long enough where it's going to continue being around long enough. But, the other one's Designing Data-Intensive Applications, Martin Kleppman's book. Like, that thing is consistently ranks in the 2000s, and has for years. I know he's coming up with a second edition at some point soon, but, but that book took him, like, I think, like 5 years to write, maybe longer. But it shows. It's really good. But when Kimball wrote his book, like, you didn't have social media back then, right? So it was like, I have some of his old articles on, the failures of the relational model and decision support systems and how he was like pushing dimensional modeling back then. These articles in 95, 96, whatever. And that was how you got your name out back then. It was just, but all these articles, though, they're pretty snipey, right? Like, I remember reading Mark Demarest's articles on, I guess 93, 94, he had the first article on the star schema, actually. That was not Kimball that came up with the star schema term. It was Demarest. And there was, in that same journal, there was a snipe against these ideas. So it's just, these people would talk shit to each other, but it was through articles. And these took like months to get out into print. So it was like, whereas now, if you had a beef with somebody, you just go on Twitter or LinkedIn and call them out, and so
yeah, and you kind of wonder whether the Kimball versus Inmon war it really was just a clever marketing technique.
It was not. No. I wish it was. I wish they were that clever to do pro wrestling. No, it was a real thing from what Bill said.
But that's the other thing that, and again, I think I got it from you and from a few other people, is, when you go through a publisher, you have this expectation that they're going to sell the book for you. They're going to market and sell it. And it's bullshit, actually. No. The first thing they're going to ask you is not what the content of the book is what you're following. Mm-hmm. What's your access to the market for them. And then, you've got to do all that hard work. I mean, my claim to fame, I have 2 right now. I got to number 1 in the data warehousing book in amazon.com.au.
Hell yeah.
So again, interesting, right? That if you go to a sub-site, you can do the screenshot that makes you look far more popular than you actually are. And my book got to number 4 in online dating in amazon.co.uk. And I'm currently sitting at 28.
Online dating?
Online dating, yep. Top 4 of online dating books in Amazon UK.
I didn't even know that was a genre to begin with, online dating. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I would use your book to hook up with people. Yeah, it
took me ages, right? And it's because in the subtitle is Stakeholders Love It. And I got no idea. Yeah, that's what I think it is. It's because I haven't classified it in that category. So somehow it's picked it up.
It's not because you're called Shagility.
No, I don't think so. Maybe, yeah, Austin Powers, maybe. But yeah, it was like, what the hell's going on? And so it's just sitting in there constantly against books about, how to bonk your partner. It's weird. It's really weird.
Maybe if it sells, who cares? I don't know. It's, that's weird. It is. But you get placed in the weirdest categories in Amazon. I don't understand it, but it's all automated. So just plunk you into whatever. And apparently yours, it looks like a steamy book. I would use it so I could, up my body count if I were doing that. So, obviously that the title screams that. I
know.
That'd be like an online dating book going into like data warehousing. It would make no sense. You'd be like, why is this happening? So
I suppose if you had an online dating book that talked about models a lot, and the keyword, maybe it'll get into the data modeling category. The other thing is, I don't know about you, but when you go into the categories in Amazon to figure out where you fit, it's legacy categories. Like there's such big, horrible buckets that you're like, actually, it's not personalized enough anymore. I don't think.
Big data, that's one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, data processing, that's another one. Let me see what Kimball's is. So Kimball's is data warehousing, database storage, and number 1 in both those, and then network and cloud computing, number 41. Now let me go to your book and see. As I clank on my mechanical keyboard here, you are 5 stars. It's really good, and then. So you're ranked in data mining, data modeling and design, and business project management books.
Yeah, and that's because I just reclassified into business project management because that's where Agile sits.
Got it.
So again, for people who don't know, you can only pick 3. So when you publish your book, you pick 3 Amazon categories, and that is the Amazon categories that you supposedly go in every Amazon site in the world. And then their algorithm will find places for you to go. And when you get misclassified, like the online dating one, I can submit a form and get myself removed from that category, which is what I should do, because being in the wrong category actually degrades my reach.
Oh, yeah.
So people go in there, they see my book. If they don't buy it, I get a negative score effectively, because the conversion rate goes through the floor. as you once told me, very few people make money out of a book, and that's true. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to leave it there because it has a good story, and it kind
so
of.
So I show up in data processing, data modeling, and data mining. These are the 3 categories, and like Kindle number 1 and like all of them right now. But then what is it? The paperback is like number 3, number 4, number 5 respectively, and audiobook. But if you ever do that, it's like
that's in .com, right? That's .com.
Yeah.
So if you go to .co.uk or .de, if you go to one of the other Amazon sites, you'll be classified slightly different typically.
Like put under like Marmite or some shit.
Yeah. And another fun fact, none of the LLMs can access Amazon's website. Because I wanted to, because one of the things that somebody told me was every now and again Amazon will just discount your book. They'll reduce the price by 25%, and that doesn't come off your royalties. So when that happens, you just want to go and blast it, right? If you want to buy my book, it's 25% off right now, and I still make the same, pittance of an amount. So I was like, cool. What am I going to do? Well, let's just get ChatGPT or Perplexity and let it scan it and run an automated task and tell me when my book's been discounted. But it can't. It's been blocked. It won't actually scrape the Amazon site, which is intriguing, right? Like, what's Amazon done to block all the LLMs in the world or the chatbots from... I mean, I haven't tried it with Grok, right? Because obviously that would do anything you want. But yeah, it's interesting how that content provider has managed to make it not available for the content aggregators or whatever.
Yeah, like you'd have to have your own back-end API, I think, or whatever, and just ping it, but then you'll probably get rate limited on that. Like, I had written a whole scraper for Amazon, but then I was like, if I do this from my house, I'm going to get my IP like blacklisted, and I won't be able to shop on Amazon. So it's like, this probably isn't like the best idea to do that.
But that's, again, with what you're working on next, having been through the process of self-publishing and all the things I had to learn and all the things that just seem dumb and seem harder than they should be, there is a massive market to just help self-publishers do that drossy stuff well, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing how much time I have wasted in doing things that I probably should have paid somebody else for. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think once I get a process down, that's part of the plan, Shane. There's something in the wings cupping with that. Stay tuned. But I feel like the publishing model right now is fundamentally broken, where it's either you have to self-publish or you have to go with an existing publisher, right? So self-publishing, as you're finding out, and I'm finding out, it's a lot of work. Like, it's a fucking job. And if you go with the publisher, cool, except you do all the work, they take all your money. That's how that works, right? So there's not a lot of middle ground, but you're absolutely right. There's... I think that there's room in the market for exactly what you said. So I don't know. We can talk offline. Maybe there's a way we can enforce this. I don't know. But I think there's an opportunity there. It's a big one. So
I think the key is, writing the bloody book's hard enough, and then you've probably got at least another 50% effort to get it ready to publish. Even like uploading your book to KDP. So the way it works is you create your book, you upload it. It goes through some kind of scanning thing, and it gives you feedback on the layout, right? It goes, this is in the wrong, out of space, you can't have this, I can't see this. So it's really good, right? It gives you this instant feedback. Trick for anybody who's writing a book that's not just a list of words, do that on a repeated basis. Yeah? Every time, every week, just upload a copy of your book in there and rescan it. Because if you don't, you will make a layout change that kills you a month later. But what I didn't know, nobody told me, is when you finally submit the book, you push the button that says publish, there is a secondary scan review process. And it finds things that the one you use doesn't. So I was like, cool, I want to publish it on the 5th of May. Yeah, and so you can schedule it to be published, which I did. I uploaded it. I said, I'm all good, 5th of May, let's start the very limited marketing I decided to do. And it came back and it said, nah, didn't pass. And I'm like, what the fuck? And then I had to go and fix everything. And then I was like, cool. I can't make that date now because you've got to give them 7 days notice effectively. So I said, all right, well, publish whenever you feel like it, and then thinking it would take 5 days, and it happened pretty much 2 hours later. So even just that real simple process where you think you've got it nailed, you haven't. You're going to learn something. Anybody that can share those war wounds, right? Here's all the things you need to think about. Then won't automate the work, but at least automate the learning.
Oh yeah, and I'm looking at using an alternative to KDP, probably Ingram actually. That's what O'Reilly uses. But I noticed that the print quality on KDP can be it varies quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
like a lot of the books I see that are written on KDP, like the images are very pixelated.
Yep.
And stuff, and I feel like for the type of quality we're looking for, we want to get something a bit sharper.
Yeah.
So
even the cover is green on my one. I'll order 10 author copies, and 2 of the green will be different on that same run.
Yeah, can't deal with that. Nah, because I think even like Ingram and similar, they use just heavier paper and just better printing process. But yeah, I think that's the route where I'm going. Yeah, KDP. I mean, yeah, I've heard. Yeah, it's just it's the void. You throw your book in there, like I have no idea what's going to happen.
But the key there is that you can probably do that. Most of us can't, because you're not obscure, right? You have a following of people. So, that example where what'd you do? You hopped on Substack with less than an hour's notice and said, hey, anybody want to chat? And 100 people turned up, right? Yep. That is unusual. Yeah, to get in the top 50. Yeah,
I thought 2 people were going to show up. I didn't even know.
And that's the power of the network, right? So you can probably write your book and publish it through Ingram, and then your network is already in place. For the people that can't or don't have that network and actually want to sell the book, then Amazon is not just a printing platform; it is a visibility platform, right? And
absolutely.
I think that's the key. So, I hope something comes up and competes with them, because their royalty fees are pretty brutal. Not as bad as publishers, but not particularly friendly.
It's a hard one, but that's where I think you guys got to have the plan to, just the funnels of revenue, right? Like you have a book that parlays itself beautifully into workshops, into courses, into all this other stuff, right? YouTube, TikTok, dating apps.
And that's, and that's actually another thing that I learned. So in hindsight, I have a course for the book. Well, I have a course for the Information Product Canvas. And what I didn't do was run that course enough as I was writing the book. And what I definitely didn't do was record all the questions I got through the course and make sure they're covered in the book. So for the next one, it's going to be slightly different. I'm going to do a bad version of the course, make it almost free, because I want to learn from people what messaging's not getting through. Yeah, what's not clear. If I see the same question 5 times, it's like, I'm not articulating that complex idea with simplicity. Just do it that way, right? Think of the course as being a free way of getting feedback to make a better book.
Absolutely.
Something that I didn't quite think about, and in hindsight, it's like, actually, that was more valuable than I expected.
That's an interesting one. That's really good advice. I didn't even think of that. Because I was asked to do the course for Coursera after the book was out, obviously, and we've done workshops and stuff, Matt and I. But it was one of those things where that course, that's just a different type of course. I don't know that you could replicate that on your own. No. You had 4 full-time people working on it, plus Amazon helping with it and Ring, so it was different. But having written the book, you kind of know what the course needs to look like, because it's I wanted these to be very T-shaped, where book, course, these are not the same things. It would be pointless to make the same thing, but it's but the courses, that's another thing though too, where it's that's marketing for you and your book is marketing for you and your course, and yada yada yada. So it's all these feedback loops, and the more you can build those, it just feeds on itself, and it's cool. So
kind of wondering, you talk about mixed martial art or mixed modeling arts, right? Nobody's really actually has one data modeling technique where you always combine them. Or maybe there's the same analogy for publishing, right?
I think there is.
And then that feedback loop. So again, you're writing your book and publishing drafts and the practical data modeling Substack, right? And then I saw your note the other day saying you're getting so much feedback now, you need to actually create a process to help you manage the feedback, right? But But that's the same technique as me using a course, right? You're pushing it out there, and then you're seeing what people are saying, like where they're struggling, and then you'll go back and iterate it and say, okay, I haven't nailed it. I haven't got a complex idea and made it simple for somebody.
Mm-hmm. And that's the key, because that's going to show up in the reviews for the book. It's like, why didn't Shane cover this topic? Why am I not clear on this? Because people will say stuff, right? Or they'll criticize you and your book and your family for not just covering this one thing that, for some reason you just didn't cover or didn't explain well enough. So.
A good friend of mine's Kat Greenbook. One of the things that I used as a forcing function was we had a competition of whose book would get published first, and she just basically kicked my ass. And then, unfortunately, she's decided to write a second book now as well, so she's going to probably kick my ass again.
Like the victory lap, just to...
Yeah.
Hey,
she's better at focusing than me. But if you look at her reviews, there's a negative review on there about her book, and it was somebody downloaded the electronic version, and her book's quite graphical as well. And the comment was something about, didn't work on my Kindle or Reflow or whatever. But that's affected the number of stars she's got on the review, and I'm like, okay, I can see the point, but it's kind of a dick review, right? It's like...
Yeah. You get those though. I mean, because if your book shows up damaged, somebody's going to leave a review about that, right? And I've even gotten books from my publisher in the mail where the book was like the cover was like cut in half, like just like sliced with a box knife or something. I don't know what happened, but just weird stuff happens. But people do complain that like the cover fell off the book, and I mean that's but that doesn't affect the substance of it, except if you can't read it, I guess. But then I saw like one idiotic review I'll never forget, and I talk about this one often, but it was, somebody left a 1-star review or 2-star saying this book is not about data science, it's about data architecture and data engineering. And I was like, yeah, no shit. Like it's literally in the title, but I don't know, you can't fucking read or something, I guess. Whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that quality, I ordered some publisher copies, author copies to send out to the people that did the Canvas examples. So in the book, I basically got a bunch of people to create an example Canvas for their organisation or a consulting project they did. So, which is really interesting. It's really interesting to see what they did to the Canvas. And I went, holy shit, why'd you do that? That's kind of valuable and really interesting, but like, why? Yeah. And so, because I'm in New Zealand, we're a long way away from anywhere, I ordered the book off Amazon.com, and tracked it, and it got to Auckland, and it sat there for 3 days, and then it got sent back to Amazon. It just didn't turn up. And, I did another one where I ordered a copy of the book for a friend in Thailand, and it wouldn't ship. It just says pending. And I ordered it twice, and it just wouldn't ship. So, Amazon's kind of this weird thing where, you just got to... it's easy to publish, right? It doesn't require you to buy 1,000 books up front and store them somewhere. There's a whole lot of benefits.
Yeah.
But it certainly isn't the best quality product or service. So that's the trade-off you make.
Yeah, it's Amazon. So...
Yeah.
Well, cool. We're coming up on time here. It's good chatting with you, man. Congrats on everything, and congrats, I guess, on the number 2 along the way. I'm sure you're gonna publish that before even my book's out. So,
no, I think now you split your one up into manageable chunks.
It had to be.
I have a theory that the first chunk is actually probably more achievable.
It is
in the big book.
There's only 4.5 chapters left to write on that one, so it's easy. Relatively,
easy. Yeah.
Well,
but how do you do that? Do you put a time aside, like your writing process?
Mornings,
I know you talked about it before.
Mornings.
So you say this is the time I'm going to write, and you
usually it's mornings if I can do it. Yeah, I mean it's but I always make sure there's at least at least 1,000 words, right? But like that's depends on what you're doing. So like after this, I'm gonna go. Work on it for a bit, and then what I have going on. I'm gonna go work on the book, and then go row downstairs and exercise. I usually work out before a podcast just so I'm not like completely tired. So that's what I do. Yeah, always try and do it in the morning. For me, I'm fresher in the morning, right? But there's also the notion of like reading for about a half hour or an hour before, because I feel like that fills the bucket, so to speak, of ideas. And then you can write, and then that's how I do it. But how do you do it?
Badly. I don't use that forcing function, so that's why Cat always beats me. Yeah, I have to force myself to write. So I have to give myself deadlines to say, actually, I'm going to try and get this thing done, and then make it public. Yeah. I know I've learned by making it public, on LinkedIn, by saying, here's where I'm at.
That's a good forcing function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every week I've got to write. On a Sunday night, I've got to write, actually, what did I do on the book last week, and what were my excuses for doing evil.
Because otherwise you kind of look like a dick. If you're always late, then, then people are like, cool, just add a week on to whatever you just told me or whatever, so...
Yeah,
bad,
especially if you don't enjoy the writing process itself, right? Then it's always an excuse of something else to do. The other thing I find is I go for a walk every day in the sunshine, and actually is where I think about it the most.
That's awesome.
So yeah, like you, I find writing in the morning easier, but actually writing after that walk is probably when my brain's been kind of nutting out a problem.
That's what you got to do.
Just find
the books we write they aren't easy. I mean, they're not like romance novels or something. There's a bit of substance to it, so it's hard to churn out. But like, yeah, I mean, just this thinking. And the thing is, it's like some things, some ideas, and some chapters just take time. Like that's literally. I mean, you're not going to force it. You can, but it's probably going to suck. Just some ideas do take time to formulate. Like there's. One chapter I'm working on right now is, I was thinking about the building blocks of data modeling, and I'm going to add in a whole chapter on meaning, actually, because this is going to tie into all the AI stuff. Meaning wasn't really a thing in data. Turns out it's going to be more important now because you have language, which wasn't as important. It was important, but not as important. So all these things you come up with them, but it's like that's going to be a hard one because you're going to go through ontologies, all this stuff, right, and semantics and super fun things. I'm sure everyone's going to be very pedantic about. So, but fuck it, is what it is.
But that's the thing. You find there's something you think is going to be easy to write, and that's the one chapter that kicks your ass.
It always happens, dude.
And you think you know what's going to be in the book. You do your table of contents and you go, got it nailed, and there'll be at least one new chapter turned up that just makes sense that you never planned to write, but actually is valuable. So it is a learning process, right? It's an iterative, agile process. It's not a factory, so it's kind of cool.
Turns out. Well, congrats on everything. It's great talking with you. I'll
excellent.
See you in London, hopefully. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, next time you're over and I'm there, we'll be probably out of London because I'm not sure I could handle the grey London weather for 12 months of the year. But we'll be somewhere around there.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Take
excellent.
care.
Catch you. Bye.
Later.